We are live in 3, 2, 1. We're live. Good morning, Coastal 6th graders, and welcome back to Mr. Cantaloupe Live. Good morning. It is April 23rd, 2020. We'll get started here in a few minutes once we get some more people on the channel, and then we will get going. Thank you so much again for paying attention, taking good notes, and doing well in those quizzes. Make sure we're continuing to do that as we continue to push through this year. I'm really excited about where we're going, and I can't wait to get there with you guys. All right. So we're going to wait a few seconds for people to go ahead and join us. All right. Good morning. We got a couple people in here. Good morning. Welcome to this morning session. Excited you guys are here on April 23rd, 2020. We're going to get started here in a few minutes once we get some more people ready to go, and we'll get rolling. If you are here, go ahead and write something in the chat bar, or you can send me a message on Team Chat on Microsoft Teams, and that way we can go ahead and figure out who's in here. Hi, good morning. Who else do we have in here? Hi, good morning, Addison. How are you today? Hello, good morning, Michaela. Do you guys like Spots, the history cow? Spots is going to be joining us more often. You're tired? Addison, you can't be tired. You gotta be alive, awake, alert, and enthusiastic. Alright, we'll get a couple more people in here. Try to get going here at 8:10 or 8:10. Sorry, 8:10. Give you guys military time. 8:10. We'll get moving from there. It'll be 08:10. I don't know why I said 8:10. Goes to show why you need to eat your Wheaties in the morning. Alright, we'll get a few more people in here, guys. Hope you're doing well. Do I get paid for watching this? No, because I don't get paid for making these. Not by YouTube yet, at least. Good morning, Veryl. How are you? I guess you get paid in a way. You make passing grades. Right? You don't watch this, you could fail my go formatives, and then it'd just be disappointing, right? So in a way, you get paid. You get educated, and that's payment enough for anybody. All right. Get a couple more people in here, then we'll get moving. Good morning to whoever just joined us. I'm doing well, Veril. Good morning, Talon. How are you, buddy? Good, Veril. I'm glad you slept well. I had a really weird dream, like at 6 o'clock this morning. I thought I needed to get up to go run. Got asked to teach a kindergarten class. It was terrifying. They're so much better behaved than you guys. It's scary. All right. We'll give everybody about 2 more minutes and then we will get moving. Oh, let's see. Has anybody got to go to the beach yet since they've been open? I knew you'd like that, Veril. Good morning, Dianara. Happy to see you on here. Talon, you were able to make it to the beach. Good. And Veril, you went out there and played soccer. Very cool. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and let's get moving forward. So, good morning. Today is April the 23rd, 2020. Everyone, you could say hello to Spot. He is the history cow. Spot's going to be making more appearances as we move forward. Don't know exactly what his role is. He may have questions for you, things like that. But that is Spot the history cow. So be on the lookout for him. He may sometimes be a secret clue that you have to find. So, let's get moving. All right. And remember, guys, and I'll go over this, my expectations about how the chat works. All right. Our standard is standard 6 W.3 or point 3.2 dash 3.7, 3.2 through 3.7. And that standard is standard number 3, recognize significant events, figures, and contributions of classical civilizations, specifically Phoenicia, Greece, Rome, and Axum. All right, guys. So basically what it's saying is we're going to understand how the roles of these classical civilizations played in the development of the world we live in today. And I'll give you a hint, it played a major role. One of the largest roles, and we're actually going to talk about that a little bit today. All right, my expectations, again, is that we take notes, we pay attention, we learn something new, and we connect ideas to earlier lessons. We can't talk about history without connecting ideas that have occurred in the past, right? When we understand things about terrain, when we understand how geography affects civilization, how religion affects civilization. Those lessons that we've learned and we've ingrained in our study so far, we need to remember to use those to connect them to ideas about where we're going. So, my other expectation is that the chat bar is used for asking me questions, not communicating with one another. All right, I ask that you respect that and make sure we use that as a way to communicate with me and not one another. That is the purpose of that chat bar, especially during my lectures. So my essential question for you are, what qualities made Alexander a great leader? What qualities made Alexander a great leader? So what I want you guys to do is I want you to write down 2 or 3 things that you think made Alexander a great leader, and I want you to put them into the chat bar. All right? 2 or 3 things that made Alexander the Great a great leader. And I want you to put that in the chat bar so I can see some of them. We'll briefly discuss them and then we'll move on. So I'm going to give you guys approximately 2 minutes to type something in, and I'll go over them, and then we'll move forward from there. All right? Go ahead and begin that now. All right, good job, Addison, getting something in first. He was smart, absolutely. He's extremely educated and used that intelligence through his education to be successful on the battlefield. Absolutely, Vero. He was skillful and he was smart. Skillful in the sense that he understood how tactics work and he used that. He had tactics, absolutely, Gus. He understood the way the battlefield worked and how that how he would use that to be successful. He never quit. Absolutely, definitely see that in the major battles of Issus and Guernicus, where he's willing to charge no matter what to win the battle. Yeah, Talon, he won a lot of battles, but why did he win those battles? That's what we're looking for. He was smart. Very good, Dianara, exactly. Y'all are doing great. You're killing it. He thought things through. Yeah, a lot of times he really did. He thought things through before he'd go and engage in a battle, and that made him spectacular as a leader. Y'all are killing it. Really blowing me away. These are great answers. Even Spot would be proud of y'all. Good morning, Dylan. Welcome. Real quick, Dylan, what are qualities that made Alexander Great a great leader? He would win with less people, Vero, but he used how did he do that, right? That's the question. You said he's skillful and smart. Those absolutely, and he had a lot of tact, right? He never quit. Not tact. He had a tenacity. He didn't want to quit. That's how he won battles with less people, right? He inspired his soldiers. Yeah, I can't say enough, Gus, how important that is on the battlefield. If you have a leader that is willing to charge into the enemy, into certain death, it's hard not to say, I won't fight with that guy, right? You see that, it inspires you, and you want to follow him. That's the kind of leader you want to follow. You want to follow somebody that hides behind you. You want to charge forward with the guy, and that is what Alexander did best. He inspired people through his actions, right? Through his absolute bravery and boldness, and that makes him a great leader. Tactics, yeah, absolutely. He understood tactics very, very well. He understood how to use the units he had to be extremely successful. All right, guys, those are some great, great answers. Again, you killed it. You killed it. Let's move on. All right. The collapse of a shooting star. Alexander's last campaign, death, and the breakup of his empire. So when we think about a shooting star, we think about something that is quick, right? You see a shooting star in the night sky, it starts out and it comes roaring across the night sky, but you only see it for a few seconds. They don't really last that long. It's something burning up in our atmosphere, right? A piece of space rock or whatever. It's burning up in our atmosphere, and that's all we get to see of it. Those shooting stars are examples of being bright and successful and incredible for that few seconds. And I really think when we look at Alexander's life, we have to look at him as a shooting star. He was incredible for a very short period of time if we really look about how long he was active and engaged. And I think that's one of the incredible things about him, is the impact he made in the short amount of time that he was alive. I really like the analogy of him being a shooting star, because we see him, he's bright, he's incredible, and then he disappears. But today we're also going to talk a little bit about his flaws. So Alexander is not perfect. Alexander's got some flaws, and those flaws are going to be pretty serious, and you're going to see them pretty clearly as we move forward. In 392 BC, we've seen that Alexander the Great has conquered the remaining cities and territories in the Persian Empire, and at this point, he adopted the title Shahan Shah, which means King of Kings. All right? This title was used by the first Persian empires, and what Alexander is clearly doing is he's aligning himself with the great Persian emperors of the past. In keeping with this status, Alexander introduced the Persian custom of proskynos, which is requiring people before they talk to the king, they have to kneel and kiss his hand. So Alexander is taking on this role as a Persian king. It's almost as if he's saying, well, I was the king of Macedonia, but that's too small for me. Persia's a greater place, so I'm going to be the king of Persia. I still own Macedonia, that's still mine, but I'd rather be more proud of being a Persian, right? Having that royalty and the power and the magnitude of the Persian Empire than that of the Greeks, or that of Macedonia. He really kind of takes on these customs, and we're going to see it starts irritating his men. Could you imagine your best friend, someone you grew up with, right? Let's say Talon. Let's imagine you are this incredible general on the battlefield, and what you do is you've had good friends fight next to you, right? You've had Gus and you've had Varel, and they fought next to you the whole time. And then one day you turned to them and said, you just addressed me without bowing and kissing my hand. What is wrong with you, right? This is Alexander's change. He went from being this, hey, you're my best friend, say whatever you want, to, oh, but first you need to do this this ceremony, this proskynos, right? You have to bow to me and kiss my hand before you can speak to me. It really sets the tone that you're elevating yourself above others, and you're introducing a custom that wasn't familiar in your friendship before. It really, really, really changes the way, or his dynamic that he had, okay? So he's starting to change because he's now this Persian king, right? And again, example of proskynos, these people are coming to speak with him. You can see the Egyptian and the royal families, right? Everyone bowing to Alexander. Far from good, right? This is far from good. The Macedonians detested Alexander's apparent adoption of Persian customs. This would eventually lead to assassination plots. So the Macedonians were like, no, this is stupid. We're not going to bow and kiss your hand, right? I fought by you side by side. I stood in the same rain and the same thunderstorms. I've been through the same thing. I bled and I've died for you. I've fought for you. And you're making me bow to you? You're making me kiss your hand? It just seems so wrong. So Alexander, he's seeing these men grumbling. He's seeing them complaining. And he ends up murdering two of his closest advisors and allies for treason and questioning his authority. Callisthenes was executed for treason. Callisthenes and his son, actually. We didn't include his son. His son was also killed for treason. Callisthenes had said, hey, Alexander, we should go back to Macedonia. We should leave these customs behind. We don't need to follow these rules, okay? We don't need to be a part of this. And for that, Alexander turns around and he said, look, Alexander, people are plotting your death. They're going to kill you. And Alexander turns around and he goes, who? Is it you? And he has Callisthenes arrested and murdered very quickly, right? Some historians said he was crucified. Other historians suggest that he died in prison. This is one of Alexander's best friends who's been there from the beginning. This guy was there with him when he first won his major victory with his dad against Greece. And this guy goes way back, all right? This has been an advisor to him his whole life. And Alexander has him arrested without even questioning his motive, without trying to figure out if it was true or not. He has him arrested and murdered for treason. And then there's Cleinias. During a drunken rage, okay, Alexander, one of the issues Alexander had is Alexander liked to drink. And some historians have even suggested that he was probably an alcoholic by this time. Alexander was prone to drink. And so one night in a drunken rage, Alexander was arguing with Cleinias about the whole bowing to kiss the hand thing, right? About the whole proskynos thing. And Alexander turns around and grabs a spear and throws it into Cletus's chest. All right? Grabs it right there in the tent and throws it and kills him right there. Bam, dead. Alexander didn't like other people's opinions. If they disagreed with him, he got really angry. This was made so much worse when he was intoxicated, right? When he was drunk. So much worse. He turns around and kills one of his best friends for no reason. All right? Just because they disagreed on a topic. Unbelievable moment, right? Unbelievable moment. Alexander is prone to extreme emotions, specifically anger. That's something you guys definitely have to remember. Alexander is prone to anger. Oh, Vera, we've been making alcohol. It was probably the third major invention that humans made. Right? Remember, I told you that the very beginning, the diet for the ancient Mesopotamians was beer and bread. All right? They've been able to make alcohol for a very long time. All right, this is a quick map of Alexander's conquest. We can see him starting in Macedonia. You can see him moving from Macedon through Thrace, up across the Hellespont, the Battle of Granicus, and then moving down through Caria, Capolia, down through Syria, Phoenicia, across the coast to Egypt, around Egypt, and coming back up through Syria, through Assyria, Mesopotamia area, down to Babylonia, and then he came to Media. What we will see today is him moving through Parthia, Argosha, crossing the Hindu Kush there in Argosha, and then moving up into the Ganges River Valley and working his way back down to, or actually the Indus River Valley, and working his way back to back into the Persian territory. So, this ancient world diagram of how Alexander moved along really demonstrates the massive journey that Alexander took in his few years as the emperor. And what a massive territory he carved out for himself. In 327 BC, the Persian Empire firmly under his control, Alexander turned his attention to India. So in 327, he said there's something more out there. And so he turned his attention to India. Alexander himself plotted the route through the Hindu Kush Mountains, through Afghanistan and Pakistan, and found his way. In 326 BC, Alexander found his way onto the subcontinent. If you guys have ever played an old video game called Call of Duty Black Ops, I think it was in 1 or maybe 2, you get to play, I think it's 2. You get to play a mission in Afghanistan. It is 2. You play a mission in Afghanistan, and you can find an old sword from Alexander's day. Okay? So, Afghanistan has seen many empires. It saw the Greeks who traveled through it on their way to India. But in 326 BC, Alexander made King Porus of Parova at the Battle of Hadropsis River. Now, Hadropsis River was the first time Alexander really faced war elephants. He faced an army, and he said that Porus battled so bravely, right? This King Porus battled so bravely that Alexander installed him as the ruler of an area larger than the one he previously had. So when Alexander crossed the river, he ran into this big army. He got in this major battle, right? At the end of it, he had so much respect for the King Porus that not only did he let the guy live, he gave him a bigger area to govern. All right, he had a small kingdom to begin with. Alexander gives him a massive kingdom when he leaves. I mean, he really comes in and says, "Hey, you rock, man. Here you go. You can have all this." Right? Really, kind of a cool moment for Alexander. He finally found a foe that he thought was worthy. Right? And that foe that he thought was worthy was King Porus. All right, of Provara. And what a cool story that is. Alexander seeing the bravery and the skill and the boldness of another general and saying, this guy is worthy to be a leader. This guy's worthy to carry on my lineage and to govern for me. Really, really cool story there. and it really shows some of what Alexander was comfortable with doing. Um, he wanted to go farther, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But at the Battle of Hydrespis River, Alexander's horse, Bucephalus, was killed in battle. His best friend in the world, his horse, died in battle, and it was tragic for him. He really, really, really felt terrible about Bucephalus dying. But he would end up naming a city, Bucephala, after him in India. So there is the city Bucephala. You can visit its ancient site today, and that city was named after Alexander the Great's horse. So he named like 19 cities after himself. He named them Alexandria, and then he'd hyphen it and have some other name along with it. But he named one specifically for his horse and his best friend that had always been by his side, and it truly was a major blow for Alexander. All right, this is a picture of the Battle of Hydrespis River. You can see the war elephants. You can see Alexander the Great is on his horse with his spear raised high, and that is King Porus with the hat. And I don't have here. I'll circle him for you guys. All right, this is King Porus right here. All right, in the mix of it, fighting against Alexander. Again, quite an impressive feat to be pictured in any form of artwork near Alexander the Great. But you can see the magnitude of these armies. It really was a deadly, deadly battle of that time. Here's Alexander right here. All right. So Alexander believed that the end of the earth was located in India. He desperately sought to be the first Macedonian to see it. That was his goal. Not only to take over as much territory as possible, but he really, really, really wanted to see the end of the world. Hi, Valeria. Hi, Soraya. Welcome, guys. Veril, that's an inappropriate question. You may want to take that down, bud. Alexander believed that the end of the earth was located in India, and he desperately sought to be the first one to reach it. He wanted to be the first Macedonian to reach the end of the world. And following the Battle of Hydrespis River, Alexander was ready to march his troops there, but his troops refused. They heard that there was an even larger Indian army waiting for them just a little bit further in, and they were terrified. They heard that they were just as brave and just as strong and just as bold. This army that had never been beaten in battle, get this, never been beaten in battle, never faced a battle that they couldn't win, with one of the greatest military strategists of all time, come to him and say, we're not going any further, okay? There's a bigger army out there and they're going to beat us. They're terrified. They've never had this many troops ever. They've never had this much strength. To their defense, when Alexander reached India, it was disgusting. It was the middle of the rainy season. It was hard to move around. It was mostly swamp. It really slowed down their movement. People were getting sick from all kinds of diseases that they weren't used to. Alexander really did hit it at a bad point in time. But when he gets to Hydrespis River, he's really thinking, hey, I can make it to the Ganges. I can make it all the way to the end of the earth. I'm going to be that Greek that does that. And he really tries to convince his guys that, hey, we should do this. We need to do this for the gods. We need to be the Greeks that take this over. No one else will be able to say this. Who else can conquer more than us if we reach to the end of the earth? If we do that, we're the greatest that's ever been, right? If we do this, we surpass Achilles and the heroes from the Iliad. We surpass what everyone else thought is possible. It's an incredibly beautiful moment for Alexander. And yet his men say, look, we're not doing it. We're not going any further. We don't want to die. So they force him to turn around. Alexander ends up realizing that his men are going to rebel if he doesn't. So he turns the army around, but he has a plan. He's going to see the ocean. So what he says, he said, look, we're going to travel down the Indus River. And I'm going to show you a picture of that again. We're going to travel down the Indus River. I'll get out my highlighter. This is where he had the battle. Okay. He goes, we're going to travel down the Indus River until we get to the ocean. This map doesn't do it justice, but he does get all the way to the ocean. He sees that there's land, so he knows he didn't make it to the end of the world, but he knows he got close. He sends part of his army back by ship through the Persian Gulf, all right, around through here, and they'll meet up and they'll march to Susa, which is located right there. All right, so his navy will end up sailing there. He will end up taking the majority of his army there as well. But Alexander makes a terrible, terrible move. He takes the rest of his troops through the Gordosian Desert. And this is going to be fatal error. That desert was extremely inhospitable and deadly to his troops. Many of the men who enter the desert would never leave. It was something like 20,000 of his soldiers died. Some historians have said even as many as 2/3 of his army passed away marching through that desert. It was extremely deadly. Extremely, extremely deadly. Yes, he did conquer India, well, at least part of it. Here's some great pictures of it. The picture in the background, right, that is the actual desert as it is today. You can see the sands. I thought it looked like snow for a second, but it is just kind of a salty, sandy terrain, really, really tough to move through, not a lot of water. And then you can see a great picture of its troops marching through the desert, carrying that heavy armor, carrying those large spears. It would have been miserable, especially with the lack of water they had there. So Alexander returns to the city of Susa. And Susa is located in modern-day Iraq, really South Iraq, almost Kuwait. Why was it deadly? Well, very quickly, sorry, Addison, great question. Why was it deadly? They had a lack of water, okay? A human body can live for weeks at a time without food. You can't live more than 2 or 3 days without water. And when you're in a desert like that, it's more like a day, okay? The dehydration rate would have been extreme. Literally, it's so hot, your skin is producing as much sweat as it can to cool you down. That's immediately going to get evaporated from you, and you're just going to feel like your whole body, it's going to go into heat exhaustion, and then probably heat stroke, and then finally they'll succumb to the disease, to that effect. So the lack of water is so deadly. They couldn't carry enough water to water all of their people and the animals. It's not like there was oases everywhere. It really was a bad situation all the way around. Alexander made a terrible blunder by going through there. Should have gone right back through the mountains he had come through, back through Afghanistan. So it very, very much was terrible for him. All right, so back to where we were. The problems in Susa. So when Alexander returns to Susa, he wanted to really merge those cultures. He really saw that it was important to take what was great about the Greek culture, the Macedonian culture, and he wanted to infuse that with the Persian culture. He really wanted to move them together, and in order to do so, he made many of his top officers marry Persian women. Alexander himself married a Persian woman. Her name was Roxana. She's pretty interesting. She actually has a son for Alexander, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. She is definitely a Persian. His officers were very confused by why he married her. She wasn't really that highly ranked either. Her family didn't have that much prestige. So politically, it wasn't that great of a move for Alexander in the first place. Is it still dangerous today? Absolutely, it's still dangerous today. Every desert is still deadly today. If you go there and you're not prepared, it will kill you. Okay, so Alexander wants to merge this society, and so he makes his top officers, marry Persian women. He believes that this is going to be a good way to instill goodwill between his peoples, that they're going to realize that they can exist together in harmony and everything will be okay. So he has his officers marry Persian women. He also gave prominent roles in his military to Persian officers. So the same people he beat in battle, he's saying, hey, here's a good role as an officer. I'm going to pay you a lot of money. You can be a general in my army. As you can imagine, that really upset some of his men. Really upset some of his men. And these actions really angered his troops. they said, no, these are rights and privileges that we have as Macedonians. We have the right to marry whoever we want. We have the right to take what we want when we win it in battle. And Alexander was saying, no, you're going to adopt these Persian cultures. And his troops really got to the point where they were going to rebel. And Alexander said, look, I'm going to drop this custom of proskynos, right? You're not going to have to bow and kiss my hand anymore. I'm going to go ahead and drop that. And Alexander, for his part, continued to dress and carry himself like a Persian king instead of a Macedonian. All right, he still wanted to show off that he was a Persian. He wanted to wear the same clothes and the same style and appear in all manner like a Persian king. This was the marriage feast at SUSA. I think the faces say a lot for it. People are not excited to be there whatsoever. Crushing grief. In 324 BC, Alexander's lifelong friend and second in command, Hephaestion, died from a fever. Alexander was inconsolable. The historian Plutarch claims that Alexander had an entire tribe slaughtered as a sacrifice for his friend. Another historian notes that Alexander had Hephaestion's doctor executed in response for not curing his friend. It's rough. He lost the closest person he'd ever had to him. The person that he could trust more than anyone else. The person who, in the heat of battle, was by his side, who never let his best friend die. I mean, this is the closest person you could ever have to you. I think about my very good friends, right? When I grew up, my best friends lived one door down from me. They were twins, and we were inseparable. I think my mom is actually on the video with us right now, guys, and she can definitely attest to how I was always hanging out with them. I was always spending time with them. I mean, this was like the closest person you have in the world passing away. It was crushing. Alexander had all the horses in the empire. He had their manes and tails cut as a sign of mourning. Alexander refused to promote any other to Hephaestion's position as commander of the cavalry, so this is a very important position. He refused to let anybody else take it. He abstained meaning he refused to eat food and drink, and declared a period of mourning throughout his empire. These are rights and things left for a king. Right? You do this when a king dies. You don't do this when his second in command dies. But Hephaestion was so very important to Alexander. When you talk about brotherly love, there's a word for that in Greek, and I believe it's eros. It means brotherly love. He loved Hephaestion so much that this crushed him. It really broke his heart. And we can see that in his decision making, right? He was so upset that he killed an entire tribe worth of people. That's not a rational response. That's not a correct response. It's not a response that anybody should ever do, right? But that's how he responded to the situation. He blamed the doctor. The doctor probably did the best he could. Now, some people have suggested that Hephaestion was poisoned by other people because they were jealous of his position. Hephaestion would have definitely been Alexander's replacement. But with his death, we really see a change in Alexander. This tomb, this beautifully crafted tomb, I'll have to get you guys some better pictures. This is one of the really cool ones I found. It has these incredible statues. It's made of marble. It's buried. For a while, they had no idea who was in it. They couldn't guess. It was a incredibly crafted tomb in the outside the city of Babylon. Exceptionally well crafted. It turns out it's Hephaestion's tomb. It's a tomb that Alexander the Great was preparing for himself one day. And because his friend died before he did, he gave it to Hephaestion. Okay? This was a incredibly elaborately prepared tomb. Of course, it's nothing like what we saw in China, right? But with Qin Shi Huangdi. But it is an incredibly beautiful and elaborate tomb. It was something that very much resembled what the ancient Egyptians had done at the Valley of the Kings. And Alexander had done it, was doing it for himself. He ends up donating this tomb to his best friend Hephaestion as his final resting place. In May of 323 BC, Alexander invited over several of his top commanders to Babylon, discussing the expansion of his empire and looking for a new campaign. The next day, he fell into a fever, and for 14 days he fought the illness. But for the first time in his life, he was finally beaten in battle. On June the 11th, 323 BC, at the age of 32, Alexander gave up his life. On his deathbed, he was asked by his generals. Deathbed is a statement for as you're dying, right? They knew he wasn't going to recover. They said, Alexander, who's going to follow you? Who's going to be second in command, right? Who's going to be the new leader of the empire? And Alexander turns to them and responds in a kind of a weak voice, the strongest. He challenges his generals. The strongest of you will rule my empire. And so he has a son, he has a wife. They don't become the king. He has very good close friends and allies. They don't become the king or the emperor. He says the strongest. Let's see what happens. This is Alexander the Great's his sarcophagus. Now, I'll explain why we don't really have a great tomb for Alexander the Great here in a minute. But it's a beautiful sarcophagus, extremely well designed, definitely befitting who he was as a person. His legacy, though, was in his in a couple different things, and we're going to talk about the legacy of Alexander right here. So, following Alexander's death, 4 of his generals claimed the pieces of the empire: Cassander, Ptolemy, Antigonus, and Seleucus. They were known as Diadoche, or the Successors. All carved out empires of their own. So when Alexander said the strongest, we get these 4 guys. And they all say, I'm the strongest. And so they end up fighting each other. That was with that S. Versus. Basically, it's battle royale mode, except on a Titanic level, right? They're fighting each other on a massive, massive, massive level for control of Alexander's old empire. Alexander's wanted his successors to establish a large, peaceful, intact empire. He wanted the Hellenistic society. When I talk about Hellenistic society, this is definitely a word that you guys need to write down. Hellenistic society, all right? Hellenistic society. It's actually the go back for a second. Hephaestion. Hephaestion is our word for the day. Hephaestion is our word for the day. Alright. Make sure you get that, guys. Boom. Boom. Hephaestion. Word for the day. I'll give you a second or two to write it down. Alright. So, Hellenistic society. When I talk about a Hellenistic society, I mean it Greek in nature. Hellen, right? Remember we talked about the Hellens are the people that inhabit the Greece. So Hellenistic society is a society that has Greek values and Greek culture. So the Hellenistic society, he wanted that to mix with the local culture, the Persian culture. His dream was of a unified empire. It never came to be, right? He wanted this unified empire. It never came to be. These generals all created their own empires, and they all battled each other for control. Cassander returned to Macedonia, where he ends up killing Alexander's wife and his child. Ptolemy stays in what is really northern Turkey and parts of Mesopotamia. He creates the Ptolemaic Empire. Ptolemy goes down to Egypt, where he creates the Ptolemaic Empire, or the Ptolemaic Dynasty. Antigonus stays in Mesopotamia, and Seleucus will actually invade Antigonus and take that over. and create the Seleucid Empire, Mesopotamia, all the way out to Susa and a little bit farther. So his dream of this unified empire never came to be. The cultures did mix, however, in what we call the Hellenistic period. So Alexander's true goal of mixing Greek culture into the rest of the world ends up really influencing the rest of the world at this time. Okay, Hellenistic period, Greek influence spread throughout Asia Minor, creating a great time of great learning and invention. What we see is that Greek culture influences the writings of the early writings of biblical writers, right? Paul speaks Greek. Peter speaks Greek. Everyone at this time learns Greek. It becomes the language of how things get done. The language of business today is English. Before that, it was Greek. People spoke Greek. They knew Greek. Greek had such a powerful influence everywhere, including Rome, right? Without Greek, Rome doesn't become Roman. Greece really changes the way the world acts and behaves. The writings of Socrates and Aristotle and Plato get spread out throughout the world. Greek plays come to the forefront. The Greek gods become part of other religions. It really changes the world. Alexander the Great did something that was impossible. He brought people together. So my final question for you: is Alexander the Great good or bad? Right? We know he did some terrible things. We know he did some really good things. He never lost a battle. Right? But he, on more than one occasion, wiped out entire towns. If you want to learn more about that, you can look at the Battle of Tyre. Right? He killed the entire population or sold them into slavery. The entire population, guys. We're talking men, women, children. Right? Killed everybody or sold them into slavery. Right? He did so much that you can still see the works today. Right? You can still see the land bridge to Tyre that Alexander the Great created to go destroy that city. He was so angry with them. You can see the incredible things he built, like or you can see the remains of the incredible things he built, like Alexandria in Egypt. You can see the impact that he had with learning on the world. But at the same time, he spread massive disease. He wiped out entire populations. He burned entire cities. So my question to you again is, Alexander the Great, was he good or bad? Does he deserve the accolades he did? And if he does, how did he overcome the flaws he had, right? Most assuredly, he was an alcoholic. How did he overcome that to be the greatest general in the ancient world? That's up for you to decide. I hope you enjoyed our lecture. Tonight, guys, I will be doing a little bit of a lecture on a battle in the Civil War called Manassas Junction. It was the first major battle of the Civil War, because I haven't got a suggestion yet on a lecture. So if you guys want to tune in and just learn a little bit about the Civil War, it's a great time to do so. And that will be tonight from 6 to 7. If you have any questions about this, or about this lecture, or about the formative, which is about to go up, please let me know. I'm going to be posting that within the next few minutes. Hope you enjoyed this lecture. I'll be back on at about 9 o'clock on live to answer any questions that you may have about it. Dylan, you asked me, how do you spell the word? You can go back and rewatch the video. I underlined it and circled it and put a square around it and did some crazy stuff. So you'll be able to figure out how to spell. All right. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed Alexander's story. I really wish I could have been in person to tell you his story. I really, really love it. But that is it for now. If you want to check out some cool stuff, there's some great movies on Alexander the Great that are out there. Watch them with your parents. They really are quite remarkable. All right. I will see you guys later. Have a great day.